Okay, thank you for joining us this morning. You are attending the Shepherd Staff 2019 Contributions and Attendance Year-End Process. Today, I'll be using Shepherd Staff 2020 as is displayed on your screen, but we will be covering the year-end process for 2019, last year, and we'll be doing that for the Contributions and Attendance modules. Let me first then introduce myself. My name is Tim Burke. I'm a software support technician here at Concordia, and I've been with the company for about 5 years, and it's been a pleasure to serve the churches across the country. And my contact information is listed there on the screen. The email address is tim.burke@cph.org, and as well as my phone number, area code 314-268-1336, in case you have any questions. Let me also remind you that all phones and microphones have been muted today. You can type in any questions that you might have during the webinar into your questions window. And our support person today, Rod, will be helping me by answering some of those questions during the webinar. And then any remaining questions that might exist at the end, we can cover those in our Q&A session as well. All right. Sitting in as support is Rod Kiles, our manager here at Concordia. His email address for contact is rod.kiles@cph.org, as well as his phone number, area code 314-268-1315. All right, let's do a quick overview of today's webinar. Today's class agenda is, first of all, doing this overview, followed by a discussion period where we will be discussing the year-end process for contributions as well as the attendance module. Then we'll do a quick review of our discussion, followed by just a short 5-question quiz, just to make sure that what I've communicated to you has been done clearly. And then we'll have any Q&A, any questions that you might have that haven't been answered throughout the webinar. All right, let's begin. We'll be covering the year-end overview. First of all, just a brief overview of what to expect for year-end. And then we'll cover the optimize and rebuild database utility, followed by creating a backup. Then we'll dive into the contributions module and talk about any open batches that you might have that need to be posted. Also wrapping up the 2019 year of pledges and recalculate those pledges to make sure that everything, all the pledges entered are being considered for 2019, as well as then entry for the 2020 pledges. We'll also talk about renumbering envelopes, any reports that you might want to run or consider running. And then we'll cover the cleanup utility, which is just an optional utility to run for year-end. Then we'll dive into our attendance module. Once again, cover any open batches, unposted batches that you might have, as well as several reports that you might consider running for the year-end. And then we'll also cover the cleanup utility, which is, again, optional in the attendance module itself. Then we'll review, have our quiz, and then the Q&A session. All right, so let's get started. Let me turn off the webcam so we can optimize the viewing space on your side. Okay, first our overview of the year-end process. For most of these modules, and let me use the mouse to kind of point these out here. The membership module and attendance and contributions module and scheduler have all had their, for the most part, their year-end utility removed from those specific modules. Really the only module that has a formal year-end utility is the finance module. And so what we'll be covering today is just the best year-end practices for the most part for contributions and attendance. We'll also then be talking about the cleanup utility, which cleanup utilities in contributions and attendance, which will purge data, but it is just an optional step. We'll cover that in more detail in just a moment. We'll then cover the reports that you'll want to run. And may I also remind you at this point that you really only need to run the year-end process in the modules that you use. So for example, if you only use one of the two modules that we'll be covering today, either contributions or attendance, you'll only need to run these year-end best practices for the most part in the module you use. And then also remember that you may want to back up your database as often as you would like, just to feel safe whenever you're doing some major changes like renumbering envelopes. You'll want to run a backup beforehand just in case something goes wrong. It's just a good precautionary step to have a backup made. And then we'll look at, let's begin here first this morning by doing the rebuild and optimize utility. In order to run this utility, really all other users must be out of the program. And so we need exclusive access to the database to run this utility, so make sure that everyone is out. And we can find that utility here under the utilities drop-down menu, and going a little bit farther than half the way down, you'll see the option here to rebuild and optimize this database. Now this utility really only needs to be run once and really only from one of the computers. You might do this from the server computer. Maybe your church office has 5 or 6 computers that run Shepherd Staff, and one of those computers actually has the database on it. So you would want to maybe consider running this utility from that one computer that serves as the server on your network. So I'm going to go ahead and left click on this rebuild and optimize option. Do you wish to rebuild and optimize your database? Yes, we do. And it's running at the moment. And what this utility is doing is just scanning and checking your database for any potential problems, and it would alert us if there was a problem. But for the most part, it's just optimizing it. It's removing some of those records that are there as spaces, because during the year you've added records to the database, you've removed some records, you've changed records, and that sometimes puts little spaces between the records over time. And so we want to optimize the database, which will clear the database of all those little spaces and make the database as small as possible and have it run as efficiently as possible. So we'll just need to wait here a little bit longer. You can follow the wording at the bottom here that says what it's doing. It's checking the database, and we just need to wait. This utility can be run on a regular basis, maybe once a month. Really any more frequent than that wouldn't necessarily be needed. In fact, the program will remind you to optimize the database. I think it's on like a 90-day cycle. So every 3 months or so, the program will remind you to run the database. Rebuild. This is taking a little bit long this morning. I apologize. There we go. The database rebuild and optimization has been completed. So now we know that our database is in good shape. I do want to also mention that this utility, it does not delete any data. It's only optimizing it. So you can rest assured that you're not going to lose anything in running this utility. It's just more of a housekeeping type of cleanup utility. All right, and now to begin our process, it would be a good idea just to create a backup of our database before we even start anything. So right now, I'm going to click on the Utilities button, and we'll take that first option, Database Backup and Restore. And I do want to choose a place, in this case, where I want to place that backup file. So I'm going to take this top option here, backup to a location. I will choose after clicking Start Backup. So now I click on the button to start backup, and then that brings up a window here in Microsoft Windows, and where we can choose a place to put that backup. I'm going to go to the C drive. There is a Shepherd Staff folder there as well. And you may have a place where you put those backups already selected. I'm going to go ahead and just create a folder here called SS Backups for Shepherd Staff Backups here in the Shepherd Staff folder. And then I'm going to open up that location, that folder, and I'm going to put my backup file right there. I'm going to click the Save button. Progress bar moves across the screen, and that backup of the database was successful. And so I can go to File Explorer here, go to my C drive, to the Shepherd Staff folder, to the SS Backups folder, and there is the backup file that I created. So any more backups that we run today, I'm just going to use the last location where a backup was saved, which will be this location. So the list of backups will continue to accumulate here in this folder during our end of year process. All right, let's go to the contributions module. Let me close some of these other windows that might serve as a distraction. All right, so first of all, in contributions here, what we'll want to do is check for any open batches that we might have of offerings. So you can either go to batches on the file menu here at the top and click on offering batches. Another way to get to it is just with our shortcuts icon bar here at the top. It's the first icon, offering batches, the letter B. Let's click on that. This is showing that we do have one offering batch yet from December that we do need to post. I'm going to go ahead and post that batch so that we've cleared out any open batches, any offering batches for the 2019 year. In this case, just to make things simple, I'm going to uncheck the option here so that reports aren't printed in this case. And I do want to continue. So I've selected that offering batch. I'm going to click the post button here at the bottom. And then what shows up on the screen when we ask to post it is the options. You're about to post offerings for Sunday 12/29. Is this correct? And I'll be clicking OK in just a moment here. We can also choose, if you use the finance module in Shepherd Staff, to go ahead and create a deposit in finance. So I'll go ahead and leave that checkbox checked. If you don't use the finance module, then you can just uncheck that box because there's no need to create a deposit there then. But we'll go ahead and create one this morning. I'll click the OK button. And that shows that batch number 4 has been posted successfully. So now we have cleared any offering batches for the year 2019, and we can close that window. Now let's think about our pledges for 2019. You may have, you may or may not as a church have entered pledges in. So if you have not, or if you didn't use the pledge utility, just bear with the rest of us for a moment while we cover this particular topic. We'll want to go to the drop-down menu here for utilities. And just thinking of pledges for 2019, Depending on when during the year you may have entered those pledges, those pledge records in, there may or may not have been some offerings that came through for the pledge period that were already in your system. So this is just a way of making sure that that any offerings that were given during a pledge period for 2019 are associated with that pledge. So I'm going to go ahead and click the recalculate pledges. This is just explaining what the utility will do. This is actually doing it here ending in 2020 because we're currently in the 2020 calendar year. This will recalculate the pledge given to date. It attaches any unpledged offerings falling within the pledge date range, providing the offerings have the same fund and contributions, which is important. It does not move or reattach offerings that were given to the wrong pledge. Number 4, it does not remove pre or post pledge offerings either. To change the year for which this utility runs, just change the module date in the lower right corner. And so what we could do is just, in this case, since we're talking about 2019, let's go down to the lower right corner of the screen where I've just clicked, and I'm going to change that date to 12/31 of 2019 so that we can recalculate those pledges just for last year and make sure that everything's attached to where it should begin, where it should belong to. So let's go once again, start that recalculate pledge utility. We've already gone through the details. Do you wish to continue? Yes. So here at the bottom, you can see it says recalculating pledges that end in 2019, and that has now finished. So now we can rest assured that all offerings given during the 2019 year have been associated with any active pledge range for that year as well. So that's a good place to be. Now let's also talk about entering pledges for the 2020 year, this upcoming year that we've already currently started. So let's first review the pledge rules that we have for Shepherd staff. So let me get back to our PowerPoint presentation here. And we have 5 pledge rules that I'd like to cover. All right, pledge rule number 1. When we're considering pledges for 2020, pledges can be entered at any time regardless of the date. So this isn't something that where you need to have the pledges in on January 1st or the first few days of January. They can be entered in today. They could be entered in next month. Just whenever you have received all of your pledge records, you can go ahead and enter those in, and that's just fine. We then, if you get it entered in later on in the year, like at the end of January or in February, we'll once again just use that recalculate pledge utility that we ran a moment ago, and that will reattach any offerings that were given here in January to the pledge range of 2020. Pledge rule number 2, new pledges should be entered each year. So what we're saying here is that you shouldn't take 2019's pledge and edit it with dating for 2020. You should really create a whole new record for 2020. Leave the pledge record for 2019 on its own and just create a brand new record for 2020. Each of your pledge records should have a new record for the 2020 year. Pledge rule number 3, 2 pledges cannot be entered for the same contributor for the same fund within the same date range. Those 3 items, if they were duplicated between 2 records, then would overlap, and that isn't allowed in the system. So if you're going to have a pledge record for contributor John Smith, and he might pledge money to the general fund for the year 2020, you can't have any other duplicate pledge record for that same general fund during that time frame. You can have additional pledge records for the same contributor, in this case our fictitious John Smith. You could have him also have a pledge record for the missions fund, any other funds that you might have in your system, but they just can't, the fund and the date ranges can't overlap for the same contributor. Pledge rule number 4, offering records entered after the pledge is entered will be credited towards that active pledge. So as soon as you enter in the pledge record, if you were to enter in some today on the 13th of January, then any offerings that are giving this coming Sunday, which would be the 19th. So any offerings entered in on the 19th, this coming Sunday, would automatically be then associated with the active pledge that you entered in today. And pledge rule number 5, pledges entered after the offerings are entered must be recalculated to attach those offerings to the pledge. So that's that first utility we ran earlier, the recalculate pledges. And so that way you can continue entering in offerings for the month of January without a problem. And then you might enter in your pledges in the month of February, and that's fine. When we run the recalculate utility, it will attach those January offerings to the pledge for 2020. All right, then let's jump back into our Shepherd staff view here. So then let's go ahead and back into the contributions module as well and talk about entering pledges. So let's go to pledge records that can be navigated to by clicking on the P icon at the top, as well as clicking on records and then pledges, either way. So right now, this is showing all of our pledge records for the year 2019. And that's because in the lower right corner, I had adjusted the date to 12/31/2019 to run the recalculate pledge utility. So let me close this window and adjust that date here to the current date. I just double click in the cell in the lower right corner, and now I've changed it back to January 13th of 2020. And let's once again open up that pledge record window. All right, so now by default, this pledge record window is only going to show you the pledges that are currently active as of today, January in 2020. So I've got 2 pledge records that I've already entered in. I've entered in one for 2 different contributors, Dave and Sue, as well as Rob Calloway, and they have pledged to the general fund. And the date range that's used here is January to December. So as we talked about earlier, if I wanted to add another pledge record for Dave and Sue for the general fund, and this was going to be, let's say, a monthly pledge for the year 1/1 through 12/31 of 2020. And I might also point out for this pledge dates, there's a button here that will cycle through preset dates. So if we click on it, this will just cycle through, I think, 3 options. So right now it's the 2021 year. If I click on the button again, it shows us 2019. Click on it again, shows us 2020, and again, takes us to 2021. So it cycles through 3 years. In this case, I do want to get to the 2020 year because we're entering in new pledges. And for Dave and Sue, we're going to say that they're going to give $500 every month. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK to that. And you can see here that then right away, it gives us a notification that the pledge dates overlap other pledges for the same fund for this contributor. So this, was one of the pledge rules that we talked about, that we can't have 2 pledges in for the same contributor for the same time frame or any part of it for the same fund. So in this case, we'll click OK, and I'll just go ahead and we'll enter in one for the missions fund for Dave and Sue, and they're going to pledge $50 a month during the year 2020. It does give us a total pledge then by what we've entered in of $6,000. We'll go ahead and click, or I'm sorry, $600. We'll go ahead and click OK. And that appears then in this second row for Dave and Sue. We can also add one for Rob Calloway. And he already has one in for the general fund, so we'll go ahead with missions. Amount of $50, let's say every 2 weeks in this case. For the year, let me cycle through our years here to get 1/1 through 12/31. And that puts us here for the $1,300 pledge record. So also within the add pledge record utility here, there is the option just to add another pledge record again. So let's just say that I wanted to go with, well, let's see here, Troy and Kira, and we'll go ahead and do for the general fund, $50 a week for the full year. And I'm going to click add again. What this will do is it keeps the same fund amount and frequency for the same pledge date period, and it will then just clear out the pledge record field so that we can then choose a different pledge or a different contributor instead. So in this case, I wanted Julie Billings. I could click that once again, and we'll add Julie Billings record, as we can see here in the back, but then it just keeps the same information or the same configuration for the pledge, and we can continue on. So if you are working with pledges, you might want to group them together by the fund that they're pledging to, maybe even the amount that they're going to give and the frequency, and you can then just enter those in one after the other, and it will make entering pledges easy. All right, very good. Let's go ahead and cancel out of this window. Now let's talk about reports. So let's go to the contribution statements itself. Now we can get to contribution statements by clicking on reports and then choosing statements and mailing labels. But there also is a shortcut right here on the toolbar at the top. We've created one because this is a common report that's run quite often, sometimes just annually, but other churches might do it quarterly. So we can use that button here at the top with the $sign on it, and it will open up the contribution statement window. All right, so here under the options for contribution statements, we have under the Who section, we have all contributors or a subgroup of contributors. Maybe you only want to produce statements for those who gave over $100. Another option might be just for one envelope. So this could be used after you've printed statements, and if somebody finds a mistake on theirs and you need to make some correction to their offering and giving history, you can make that correction, and you can come here and just select the one envelope and then choose which person needs that replacement statement created. But in this case, for this morning, we're just going to use all contributors. You can also choose to exclude those who prefer email, because this is going to be a print process. And so those you might not want to then actually print off. But in a lot of cases, even if some contributors have email addresses, they still prefer to get their statements by just by regular postal mail. So that's what we're covering today. From there, we'll go over to our what section here on the right. And so we provide the date range. And so in this case, what we'll do is we want to go back to the 2019 year to produce statements for last year. So January 1 of 2019, then to 12/31. You can use the pop-up calendars here, which then gives this window. Let's see, let's go back to 2019 and then choose December 31st. So this is our 2019 date range. You can also just type the date right into the field here. So I'll go ahead and type in 12/31/2019. Whoop, 2019. There we go. And then the type of statement, we'll be using statements here for the most part for this webinar, but there also is the option here for gifts in kind acknowledgements. And that way, if by chance anyone in your congregation maybe gave some type of non-monetary donation, a couch or lawnmower or something of that nature, you could also print out an acknowledgement of that gift as well. That would be a separate sheet of paper outside of the statement. But for today's example, we're going to go with statements. And then here under the options, you can sort by envelope, by name, or by zip postal code. We're going to go by envelope. You can choose then to print a message here. And so there may be an IRS message that you want to make sure that gets on the statement. So we might, if we need to create one, you can use the option here at the bottom, message, which will display this screen. And we can then add a new message and call it the IRS message. And then type in whatever information, you know, these, any information about the donations that were given. And then you'd be able to use, well, let's see here, geez. And so this is our, I'm just going to type in test message for today. So that's our message. That adds another message to the listing of messages that are available. We could then choose to select that one. And then that puts our IRS message on the statement as well. Then if you have a federal ID number that you'd like to include, that would be entered in on the main menu under settings for your church. But here under the, we have some check boxes here, itemize offerings if you want to refer to each and every offering given and the day they gave it, or you can choose just to summarize it by unchecking that box. But we're going to go ahead and itemize this morning. And we're also going to go ahead and include any special descriptions for any of the offerings. You can also have to group by fund and to group by pledge within fund. Any of these options can be deselected if you don't really use pledges and things like that. Some churches for the pledge terminology may like to use a different term for the word pledge. So we have faith pledge, promise, and so forth. We're just going to go ahead with the default pledge, but just know that that option is available. And then you can choose to show on the statements themselves if someone is ahead or behind in their pledge. You can also choose the terminology there, ahead or behind, or amount remaining, the balance due, remaining balance. Let's go with just amount remaining in this case. And then let's go ahead and preview our statements. All right, so in this case, then whenever you ask to print a report, it's always going to show you a preview first. So here, as we've got the whole batch of statements printed. In the upper left corner where I'm circling is our page navigation. I'm going to go to the last page just to see how many pages were created here. give you an idea, there's 110 pages of statements. I'm going to go back to the first page, and we can see the contribution statement for Dave and Sue. Gives the date that it was printed on, the envelope number that they have, and the 2019 year-to-date contributions. It then breaks it down by fund. So here for the building fund, there's one offering that was given, the education fund back in May. And then most of their giving here was to the general fund. And you'll see that there's two columns. And so this kind of goes back and forth between the columns. So we have January 13th here on the left, January 20th on the right, February 3rd on the left, February 10th on the right. Kind of bounces back and forth. Some of the descriptions here, these were EFTs, and shows the fund total to the general fund as well as pledge information. So they had pledged on a frequency by week. The total pledge was $16,380. The amount per period per week was $315. They pledged as of the date 12/31 that amount, and this was the pledge range showing the whole year of 2019. This was what was pledged per date, and this is what was given to date. And so the amount remaining to their pledge is $2,320. So that type of information is available on the statement itself. We can then go through and look at page 2, which finishes off the general fund and then goes on to the missions fund, music ministry, and so forth for Dave and Sue. If we then go to the third page of our complete printing job, then that's where we see Sally Baxter's contribution statement, and go on to the fourth page and we see Troy and Kira, and it's just one after the other. And so when you print them, it will print them on separate pages, and you can then mail those out. Let's also look at another report, and this time you can either click on the icon that has the letter R here at the top, or you can go to the file menu drop down here for reports. That brings up the same window in both cases. So let's look at the contributions by week report. Select that. Now these are just reports that you can consider printing. This is certainly optional, or there may even be some other reports that I'm not going to demonstrate today that you may want to print off if your treasurer requires it or asks you to do so. But this contributions by week report is pretty straightforward. All we need to do is select the date range. And so I'm going to go ahead and put 1/1 of 2019 in there and type it directly in, and then as well as 12/31/2019. And I believe this one may be the one where you can select up to 5 funds for the contributions by week report. So we're going to go ahead and maybe select 3 of them just for the demonstration. We'll add that. We'll add the missions fund number 2, and then let's also do the building fund. Well, actually, let's do the youth fund and the building fund. So we'll add both of those. So we have 4 different funds. Click OK, and then we'll go ahead and preview this. And so this is going to show you a breakdown of contributions by week to those 4 funds. You'll see the general fund here in the first column, the missions fund in the next one to the right, the building fund in the third column here, and the youth fund finally as the 4th column. This very left margin has the date range of the week in the year. So that kind of breaks things down then of what was given on a weekly basis to those 4 funds. We can then go ahead and use the navigation bar at the top in the upper left corner to go to the next page, page 2, and that finishes out the 52 weeks of the year, and then also gives us some totals then for the whole year on that last page. So that's an option for a report to run. Let's go ahead and close that, and let's move on to the fund summary report. For this report, there are 3 report types: fund summary, 5-year comparison, 5-year comparison with graph. We're just going to go with this top option for today, Once again, use the 1/1 of 2019 last year. And let's go ahead and maybe include a pie chart on the last page. We're going to sort by, you can sort by the name or by the fund number. Let's go ahead and sort by the fund number in this case and preview this report. So this report is going to go ahead and list our offering funds in by fund number in numerical order. So the general fund is our number 1 fund. This is showing the offerings that were pledged and that was given, along with the number of offerings during the year of 2019 and what the average offering is. So we'll break that down by each of the funds. Once again, we can go to the last page of the report, which is page 3, and that shows us then a breakdown of the offerings in a pie chart. And that can be helpful. It's showing it in color. And you can see that most of our giving in this demo database is done to the general fund. And so 96.3% of the offerings were given to that fund. In your case, it would probably be broken down a little bit differently and then give you more of an interesting pie chart to view. But that is available then in the fund summary report. And any questions that you have about these reports that you want to go into more detail, please feel free to give us a call and to our tech support line, and we'll be glad to cover that in more detail with you. And then the final report that we might want to run would be the contributions by contributor, fund, and household. Let's select that one. We'll go with all contributors once again. The other option is just a subgroup of contributors, and so you could qualify that in whatever way you want, but we'll go with all contributors today. Once again, with a January 1 of 2019 dating. And we'll do all funds, let's see. Maybe include the pledge summary and sort by envelope number. Let's just go with some of these default settings. Go ahead and preview the report. So this is going to break it down by contributor. So for Dave and Sue, it's a nice breakdown of what they gave by fund and what was pledged, which funds were pledged to, and what was given, the amount that they were ahead or behind, and then the last time that they gave to that fund during the year of 2019. And that just breaks down for every contributor in your church. And we can go to the last page once again. There's 12 pages. This gives us a total. I think I'm going to go 1 page previous. Okay, and so yeah, that is the total there on the last page. I just wanted to see if there was any other subtotals. That's your contributions by envelope. It's just another report that you can consider running to break down or break out the offerings for 2019. All right, let's talk about envelopes and renumbering them. So first of all, what we'll want to do is we can go to the envelope assignment screen by clicking on records and then contributors, or you could do it also the same thing by going and clicking on contributors and then records. It takes us to the same window. And this is going to show us our current assigned contributors and the envelope that they have for the current year. And this is what they had in 2019. So it was important that we print off those contribution statements, first of all, before renumbering envelopes for 2020, because the contribution statements do refer to the envelope number that they used in 2019. So you first want to print off those contribution statements and get that wrapped up. Then we can go ahead and apply the changes for renumbering. In this case, what we want to do first is we're going to refer to this column here, skip renumbering. So after 2019 here, there may be some folks that may be transferred out of the church and are no longer going to be in need of an envelope. And so we'll want to skip them in our sequence of numbers. So let's just say here, for example, that Teresa Carter, let's see, in order to, let me mention this, in order to put a check mark in the skip renumbering field, which makes it easy for entering, we will want to unlock the grid, and that's this button here on the bottom. We can unlock the grid, and then we're able to access these columns right here on the screen. The ones that are have a white background, those that are grayed, you won't be able to access yet. But this makes it easy for entry. So for Teresa Carter, we're going to go ahead and skip her for the 2020 year, as well as Arlene Dowling. And let's just say these folks transferred out of the church. And you could do that, let's say Trisha Lewis as well. And so these were 3 people, let's just say, that transferred out and won't need an envelope number anymore. And so we'd want, in this case for Teresa Carter, we'd want to make the envelope 109 available for someone else to use. And so skipping her, what the renumbering utility will do is assign her a number for next year in the 10,000s. That just removes her from the current series of envelope numbers that we are using for legitimate contributors, and it will just assign a number in the 10,000s, and it will keep her giving history up to this point in the database all under that 10,000 number. So I'll show you that here in just a moment. But that's the first step that you'd want to do, is go through and place a check mark for anyone that you need to skip renumbering for. Then what you have 2 ways of renumbering envelopes. You could either do it manually by coming to this envelope next year column, and we could say maybe that this year we want to hand out envelopes beginning with envelope number 1. So this coming year, Dave and Sue Abbott, we'd want to give them envelope number 1. I can type in the 1 in there. Sally Baxter would then, in this case, have envelope number 2. And we could go on down the line and manually change these numbers. And then once we lock the grid, then the preparation to changing those or assigning those new numbers is then done. Let me, in fact, lock the grid here. And so this next year envelope number that we're working on for 2020 then is manually changed in that way. But an easy way then to also do it would be to use the automatic feature. And we can find that here under utilities. And there's the option here to renumber next year's envelopes. So let's look at that. That brings up this window here we can look at it 2 different ways. We can continue to use the current year envelope for next year's envelope numbers. So that means that any envelope number that was assigned and used in 2019 would remain the same envelope number for those contributors in 2020. The only thing that would happen in this case would be anyone that we had checked the box to skip renumbering, they would then be renumbered to a number in the 10,000s, which then leaves their previous envelope number available for someone else to use that might come to the church as a new member this year. But the other option here is to actually then assign next year's envelope numbers for 2020 alphabetically and in numeric order then. And so what I do want to use is the number 1 here to begin with. You could always start with number 101. Maybe that might be the best way, or maybe you'd want to go with a different series of numbers like 301, and it would just assign numbers beginning there at 301 on up. In this case, most often you'll be using either a number 1 or a 101. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and take this option here. One thing we will want to do before we run this renumbering utility is we really should create another backup. So that way, if for some reason during our renumbering, well, let's see, let me rethink that here. Let me change that. Let's go ahead, still with our automatic renumbering. Assigning numbers alphabetically, starting with 1. Are you sure you want to renumber next year's envelope numbers? And yes, at this point, all we're doing is preparing the numbers in the next year's column. So let's take a look at our result. So what you'll see here is still the current numbers are in place from 2019, but now the next year's column has been automatically renumbered sequentially and alphabetically. And you may notice that one of the names that we had here was Carter. I believe it was like Linda Carter, or oh, maybe I'm thinking of the actress. But she was listed here, and she has now been moved to the bottom of the display. We should find her here at the bottom. Teresa. Teresa was her name, and you can see that she had 109 in 2019, but now this coming year, since she transferred out, she would be given a number in the 10,000s, which then puts her way outside the range. And we can see right above that line that really the highest envelope number that we have is 71. So if you purchase then envelope boxes, you'll know that you only need 71 this year. But that was all done automatically, and now these envelope numbers still have not been enabled or put into place to start using for this year yet. They're still just in this preparatory state of being in the next year column. What we'd want to do then, after we've renumbered envelopes and we're kind of verified everything looks good, is we'd want to close this window, and our next step would be to put those 2020 envelope numbers into play, enable them. So before we do that, this is where I would want to create a backup file, because we're just about ready to make a major change of envelope numbers, and it would be a good idea just to get what the database looked like before making that major change. In this case, I'm going to take the last location used because I created that Shepherd Staff backups folder, and we're going to go ahead and start the backup. So that backup was successful. So that backup now, as a precautionary step, has the way our database looked before we assign those new envelopes for 2020. So let's now go ahead and make that assignment. We can go to the Utilities menu, and you'll see that the utility that we want to run is called Start Using Next Year's Envelope Numbers. That's what will enable the envelopes for 2020. So we'll go ahead and click on that option. It says that it's highly recommended that you make a backup of your contributions data, which we just did. And then clicking yes will activate next year's envelope numbers, and that's the ones that we've assigned for 2020. And do you want to activate those? And yes, we do. So I'll go ahead and click yes in this case. So next year's envelope numbers are now activated. We can, and then you should sync your contributions with Web Tools after activating envelope numbers. Would you like to do that now? I'm going to go ahead and skip that step for today. Web Tools is a feature that was recently added in Shepherd Staff in the last several years, and that gives you the opportunity to create offering batches from a remote location, and not necessarily having to do it in the church office. So if you're interested in learning more about Web Tools, just give us a call and we'll go over that in more detail. All right, and so we're going to say no to that. And now we just want to check to see that our envelope numbers for 2020 are now in place. So we'll go up to Contributor and then Records. And here's that same view that we were on a few moments ago. And now you'll notice that the single digit and double digit envelope numbers are now in this current column. So we have now activated the 2020 envelope numbers, and we are now able to enter in offerings that have come in January. And you want to just make sure that those 2020 envelope numbers are appearing in the current column before you start entering new offering batches then for 2020, just to make sure that the correct numbers are in place. All right, now that we have our envelopes renumbered and in place for 2020, let's talk about the cleanup utility. So the cleanup utility is just an utility that's optional. It really, and it's located here under utilities at the bottom, cleanup. And once again, it's highly recommended that you make a backup before using this utility. Now again, this isn't something that is required in your year-end process, and really it will only affect records that are 10 years old or older. And let me give you an example of that here. I'm going to go ahead and click yes to continue. So what the utility, cleanup utility that comes up will show you then that this will just delete all pledges and offerings that are older than 10 years ago. So 1/1 of 2010. We're in 2020 now. This is going to delete all pledges and offerings older than 2010. So if you have not even had Shepherd staff for that long of a period, you don't need to worry about running the cleanup utility. It's only exclusively run over those records 10 years or older, and even at that, you still don't have to run this utility. It's just optional. Data is stored now, in such a small space that you're not going to really save that much room unless you happen to be a big church with thousands of offerings, and we probably all wish we had a church of that size. But other than that, it's just a purely optional utility. I'll cancel out of that today. All right, so that's basically it for the contributions module. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we might consider for the attendance module. In opening attendance, the attendance module was redesigned last year in 2019, so we're looking at the new view of attendance. And for this module, then we'll want to, once again, like contributions, make sure that all attendance batches have been posted. So in this case, we are in the attendance batch screen, and there's nothing listed. So we've already have taken care of posting all batches in 2019, and so we're clear to continue on with the next step. And so really the next step is just going to the reports drop-down list, and we'll want to select the reports option here on the navigation bar at the top of the attendance module window. And we'll cover just 2 or 3 reports, and then we'll be coming close to the end of our webinar today. So thank you once again for your patience. You guys are great. Let's look at the attendance by event report. So first of all, this report, for who you want to run it for, it might be everyone except removed people. You may want to run it on everyone. You may just want to run it on current members, those members who have not transferred out, who are currently active in your church. There's just a number of different options. You might just do it for all members, whether they're active or whether some were maybe attending earlier in the year and then transferred. That would be all members. So we're just going to go with everyone at the moment. we'll choose the date range of 1/1 of 2019 to 12/31. Excuse me. You have the option here to select types of events or the events themselves. You could do it by depending on what kind of events you have set up, traditional worship, contemporary worship, Sunday school. But in this case, I'm just going to go with types of events, and we're going to not select the others. We're just going to select all worship events, communion events, and Sunday school events. We'll go ahead and sort this maybe by person first of all. And then let's go ahead and just check all options here. There is two options here on the far right in the corner to select all or to deselect all the check boxes here. So you can do that as well to get all those check boxes checked. And then let's go ahead and preview this report. So we click on the print button. And it displays us this preview. So here is our attendance by event, by person, which is the way I wanted it sorted. We can look at the last page here to see how many pages. It's a total of 33 pages. It gives us some report totals on that last page. I'll go ahead and go back to the first page. And this is covering all the information about the individual people. In this case, it breaks it down even by the household. So we have first David, who's the husband, and then Jacob and Lacey, which are children, and then Suzanne, who is the wife to David. It breaks it down to how many times they attended worship, how many times they attended a communion event, and then the total, as well as the last day that they attended. In Jacob's case here, he attended worship, which is one of the children, by the way. Jacob attended 44 times, in this case 44 communion and 44 Sunday school, and so that shows then the last dates that he attended the contemporary worship as well as Sunday school. And it breaks it down here. Let's look at Allison. She has 3 different event types: contemporary worship, Sunday school, and traditional, and shows her attendance to those. You can see how that it just gives a good amount of information about the individuals. But you may not want it by person. Maybe that's too much information. So let's go and sort this by event. And we'll still continue with the types of event. And in this case, I think I'm going to go ahead and remove all of these other options. Well, let's go ahead and preview this. This is just really a basic, straightforward report. It's just one page. It shows that the contemporary worship occurred 52 times this past year. The distinct people that, different people that attended, 123, distinct households, 123. There was a total of, in worship, of 3,028, and in communion, 2,969. Shows the date range at the top of the screen. And it breaks it down by the events themselves, Sunday school and traditional worship. Pardon me. So that's what that report looks like by event. Let's also take a look at another report, attendance behavior. Oh, let's see, let me open up attendance once again. I'm sorry, we need to get to the reports menu. So attendance behavior, this top report option. We have the option once again to select who we want to print this report for. So do we want to consider everyone or maybe just members? Let's go ahead with maybe just all members this particular time. And now the nice thing about this particular report option is that you can choose from a number of different behaviors. People, all members maybe who did not attend, so you can follow up with them. All members who maybe missed more than a certain amount, so out of the 52 weeks, maybe you want to print out a report for those who missed more than 25 times, about half the year. Or maybe those people who attended at least so many. And if you make that selection, you can then choose how many times that they attended. So maybe a report of just those who have attended at least 6 times during the year. Those with perfect attendance, you could print a report for that as well as those who missed only a certain amount of times. So you can set that number as well. So let's maybe, let's just do one here for the people who did not attend. Once again, using 1 of 2019. So people who, all members who did not attend worship, communion, or Sunday school, we could then sort and group that by person. And then also choose to include certain information about those individuals, maybe a current address. Let's just go with that this particular time, preview that. So in this case, it gives us the title of people who did not attend during the year. And these were the 7 people, a total 7. It represents 3 households. Total households 3. It shows their address. We could also have listed more include information. And it does show here that Katrina did attend a contemporary worship service right at the end, or right in September of 2018. So that's a little good information to know if there was any last attendance there as well. But we could choose to also show maybe phone and email. And let's just preview that real quick, show you how that affects the report. All right, so that shows their phone number, and then it would have showed also email if one was available. But this way you could contact those people and follow up with them. But you could also then, if you'd like to print a report of those who with perfect attendance and maybe even honor them in a certain way. But this report option is something to consider as well at the end of the year. Let's look at one other report, the attendance comparison report. This would show us a comparison of all attendees. Let's see, what might we do here? Well, let's go ahead with a weekly comparison for the last 5 years by worship type. We'll do that across the page. I'll go ahead and preview that. And this shows us a comparison of the last 5 years for worship as well as communion. The way this works is it's showing us 52 weeks out of the year. The upper row of numbers would be each of the weeks beginning here in January. So 53 on that first Sunday in January, 59 in the second Sunday of January, as well as going down to the lower row here, which then this gets to be the last 2 Sundays in December. And that rounds up the 52 weeks of the year. And so that might be, at least you can then compare just from the top and the bottom numbers in each of these year rows to previous top and bottom numbers of any of the 52 weeks of that year. We could also just clean this up a little bit, maybe not do it weekly, but do it more monthly. That might be. So here are the 12 months across the page, comparing your worship, communion, and Sunday school events and how that changed over the last 5 years. So that can be an interesting report just to have available to run at year end. These are just some reports to consider. Those are the main 3 that I just wanted to show today. Let's also talk about the cleanup utility here in the new attendance module. That's listed under tools and settings here. The option is featured here under Tools. It's the first one, clean up your attendance data. Let's go ahead and click Start. And once again, this is reminding us that it is highly recommended that you make a backup before running this utility. And the same way here as it was with contributions, all this will do is delete all attendance detail records from before 10 years ago. So it's using the date 1/13/2010. Please make note of that. And it's only going to delete attendance detail records prior to that date in 2010. So anything older, 10 years and older, it's going to delete. If you haven't had Shepherd staff that long, you don't need to even think about running this utility, because there's just no data there until you've had the program for 10 years. So this option is, this utility is certainly optional. We would want to run a backup before deleting those records though, from 10 years ago. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this though for the moment, because I think you get the idea. And let's close this window. So now we're back to our main menu. All right, so let's go ahead and review. All right, we finished up on our pledge rules earlier. So our review today. All right, to perform the year end, you would want to do it in this order. You would want to do contributions first, followed by attendance, followed by membership. Now those are the only three modules that you really need to concern yourself with in what order to do it. And if you don't use one of those three modules, you can just skip that module. So you may only use contributions and membership. So all you would need to do is contributions first, then followed by membership, and you'd skip attendance. Maybe you don't use contributions, and you only use attendance and membership, then just do those in that order. But scheduler and finance are independent and can be done at any time. It's really just this contributions and attendance and membership that should be done in that order if they're used. Remember these basic steps. First, update and enter in all of your data. This includes updating envelope numbers and posting any remaining batches from 2019. Then you'll want to remember to run any needed reports. So this includes at least the contribution statements and maybe the attendance comparison report. We showed a number of other optional reports to run. It certainly is up to you what you would like to have on hand. Maybe someone on your staff requires certain reports at the end of the year. So just run those that are beneficial for you. But you would want to do it in that order. And then besides that, you'd want to follow that with making a backup. So making a new backup before completing each module's year-end task will give you a way of a fallback point that you can go to then if something is incorrect or you find an error after running the year-end. And so that's just a precautionary step. It's a good idea to make plenty of backups. Also, in completing the year-end task for the module, then check your data afterwards to verify that your changes are correct. Then make another backup when your year-end tasks are complete. All right, so let's jump into our quiz section, and this will just be 5 quick questions about the year-end process to make sure that I covered it well for you and just to see if you picked up on some of these things. So let's go to the first question here. True or false, the Rebuild Optimized database utility should be run on every single computer that has Shepherd staff. Let me launch that question out. And if you would select one of those answers by clicking on either true or false on your screen, we'll go ahead and tally up the totals here. I'll keep it open just a little bit longer. All right, very good. Let's close the poll. Let's go ahead and share the results. So we got 92% voting false on that and 8% voting true. So the answer to that is false. The Rebuild and Optimize database utility will run its checks on the database for all users and all computers that are connected to the database. If one person runs database rebuild, the rest of the staff will not need to run that utility. So the most of you got that correct. It's really run over the database, so it just needs to be done once, and then it's complete. Let's go on to the next question. Very good. Oh, and also a note real quick, running this utility does not delete any data. Remember that you're free to run that Rebuild and Optimize on a regular basis to keep your database in tip-top shape. All right, this is a multiple choice question. Which utility should you run to make the next year's envelope numbers active? A, the renumber next year envelopes. B, start using next year's envelope numbers, or C, Rebuild and Optimize utility. Let me go ahead and launch that. And if you would make the appropriate selection there, whether you think it's A, renumber utility, B, start using next year's utility, or 3, Rebuild and Optimize. I'll leave it up just another moment. Make your selection. All right, very good. We'll close that. All right, and then let's take a look at the answer. In this case, it is B. The majority of you got this correct. In order to start using, well, remember the renumber next year envelope utility helps you just assign envelope numbers for next year, but you will still need to run the start using next year's envelope utility. That's the answer right there. And that will move those envelope numbers from the next year envelope column over to the current envelope column. And this will allow you to use the new numbers when entering offerings for 2020. All right, very good. Let's go on to the next one. Oh, and one other note on this too. Please double check your envelope numbers prior to entering this year's 2020 offerings. If offerings are entered using the old envelope number, the only 2 resolutions are to restore a backup or manually correct the offerings. So please make sure that if you do renumber envelopes every year, that those new 2020 envelopes are in, that you've enabled them and they're in the current envelope number column. All right, true and false. All contributions and attendance batches should be posted prior to running the final year-end reports. It's true or false. Select which one. All contribution and attendance batches should be posted prior to running the year-end results, our reports. I'll leave it open just for another moment or two. Make your selection. All right, I'll go ahead and close it. Let's go ahead and view the answer then. And 100% of you got this right. It's true. Please post all of your contribution and attendance batches prior to generating the year-end reports. Not doing so will leave your year-end totals short and inaccurate. Very good. Next question. Pledges can be entered at any time, regardless of today's date or the pledge date. We launched that question here. Pledges can be entered at any time, regardless of the date. I'll leave it open for another moment. All right, very good. Let's go ahead and close the polling and share the answer. And 100% of you got this correct again. It's true. Shepherd staff allows users to enter next year's pledges now, and it allows a pledge to be added once a pledge drive has been started. So please remember to recalculate pledges if offerings were present prior to the creation of the pledge. And I believe this is the final question. So true or false, you are required to run the cleanup utility each year in every module. Is that true or false? You're required to run the cleanup utility each year in every module. All right, very good. Let's go ahead and close the polling. And 100% of you got that right again. The answer is false. Running the cleanup utility is just optional. And this utility permanently deletes records from your database 10 years ago and older, meaning that you can no longer reference or report on that information. So please execute caution when running that cleanup utility. All right, very good. So do you have any questions? I'll go ahead and look at our questions window to see if anyone has any additional questions. Please type in your questions there. And as I leave that question window open for a little bit here, I do want to once again just apologize for our technical difficulties earlier today, and we got started a little bit late, but I appreciate your patience so that we could get that fixed and worked out so we could get a good recording here. And I do want to thank you also for attending today. And we hope you enjoyed today's session. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to contact us at 1-800-346-6120. That's 1-800-346-6120. You might want to write that down. That's the phone number to use for technical support. And you can always email us as well at support@cts.cph.org. And myself, along with the other members of our technicians team, will be glad to address those questions that you have. But it is important to use that phone number. That way we'll be able to help you as efficiently as possible. All right, any other questions coming through? All right, it doesn't seem like any other questions are coming through. So I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar today. Once again, thank you very much for attending and have a great day.